Hello and welcome. So my name is Shelley Allen and I'm the Head of Open Research at Emerald. This is Martin. Martin, you're going to introduce yourself?
My name is Martin Jagerhorn and I'm Head of Business Development at ChronosHub. So I work a lot together with institutions, but also a lot with publishers and research funders. So I'll support you through a live demo here later on. Over to you, Shelley. Thank you.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about how we're working together with a strong focus on optimizing the author experience along the end-to-end publishing process. So first, I'd like to introduce you to Emerald, if you are not aware of us. So we are a medium-sized family-owned publisher based in Yorkshire in the UK, and we have high ambitions. We want to drive open research forward. So we like to say that we're open to all, which for us means that we've developed a variety of routes to publish openly for our communities. We're strong in applied social sciences with a diverse authorship, both in terms of being global, as well as having a mix of authors from academic institutions and practice. We've already entered into a number of transformative agreements and hope to enter into more. And this is important for our authors because most of them, over 90%, have not got funding. They're in receipt of no research funding. And so they don't have access to funds to pay APCs. So we provide discounts and waivers to those who are based in developing countries. We allow open access of the version of record in all of our subscription journals. And whilst also having 2 fully gold open titles that are APC based, we also have Emerald Open Research, which is an open access platform mandating open peer review and open data, which is pretty progressive for a social science publisher. We were also one of the first to introduce a zero embargo green policy, which is important for those authors not covered by a read and publish agreement. And on top of all of this, we have a growing programme of Diamond open access journals where the cost of publication and additional services are met by a sponsoring partner. That's allowing full open access at no cost to the library, or funders, or authors. So we think that's an impressive array of options for our communities, but we're always looking to make things as easy as we can. And with a portfolio of 350 journals and about 80,000 submissions per year, it's critical for us to provide an outstanding author experience. And we want to serve all our customers with a seamless workflow for approvals, payments, reporting, and data access. So in terms of the wider problem, the problem is, on the next slide, please, thank you. The problem is that open access leads to many complexities, not only for Emerald, but for all of these stakeholder groups. There are a lot of common challenges. So funders have increasingly complex policies, making it difficult for authors to know where they can publish without running the risk of being non-compliant. They don't know where our deals are, they don't know what they're eligible for. And a lot of them actually in the social sciences space don't necessarily even know the difference between green and gold OA. So publishers are developing new business models as a response to the mandates from funders and the requests of librarians. And this adds to the complexity for universities and funders to ensure compliance to approvals and payments. But worst, however, is the experience of the authors as they manually have to enter the same data over and over again to all stakeholders when submitting, reporting back to funders and populating local repositories. So the current situation is fragmented, costly and time consuming for everybody. So today at Emerald, the author experience is equally fragmented with a lot of manual input. Now, this is quite understandable when you consider that our first transformative agreement was published was signed just 2 years ago. So we weren't very geared up to scale for gold open access. And what's developed really is a very manual process. So the articles are siloed across multiple submission sites, and they can't easily find what they're entitled to. This is the authors, they can't easily find it. Signing the right license agreement requires manually navigating through questionnaires where the author doesn't necessarily know the answer. And internally, Emerald administrators manually apply APC vouchers, invoices and reconciliation of accounts. as well as manually serving the consortia and institutional members with data and reports. It is very manual. There are lots of single person dependencies within the process. And so we've been really pleased to be collaborating with ChronosHub for a better future. And I'll let Martin explain what that future is.
Right, thanks a lot, Shelley. When we're now looking at these different challenges, we together try to put the author's experience first. So throughout the workflow, we're trying to ensure that the authors have ideally nothing to do in terms of administration or filling in forms or similar. But we're still dependent on them to do the actual submission. So the starting point now, instead of going in directly to the submission system, where, as Shelley said, they have to create a new profile for each of Emerald's journals, even though it's the same submission system. They will now be able to log in to an Emerald branded environment on ChronosHub, where all of Emerald's journals are available. And we'll have a look at this in a live demo soon. We've also integrated ChronosHub with Emerald's login server. So they use liblinks, which is also a federated authentication system connecting with a lot of different universities' own authentication systems. So authors, they simply can use their usual username and password when they log in to Emerald on ChronosHub. And the only thing we ask them to do at that stage, if we don't have that information on them already, is to confirm their organizational affiliation. Because it's a lot around the organizational affiliation that drives, of course, information around any agreements between the institution and Emerald. So we can display that for each individual journal title that is sort of part of this agreement. And in ChronosHub, as usual, the authors can also check each journal what the compliant routes are seen to different funding policies. And we've now integrated ChronosHub with ScholarOne in a rather tight way. So once the author presses the submit button in ChronosHub, ChronosHub sends the data into ScholarOne. And then we don't do anything during the peer review process. So the editorial team may get back to the authors to complete the submission and so forth and submit sort of their latest version of the manuscript in the end. But once it's accepted, we pick up all the article metadata and the full texts into ChronosHub. And we also ensure that any changes to affiliations or similar is sort of taken into account in ChronosHub. And now, instead of the authors having to do a lot of things manually, we simply suggest them based on existing agreements, the solution or the license agreement that is recommended or applicable. So they only have to confirm their way through the process rather than selecting and having to know a lot of things. At the same time, as we offer the flexibility for them to opt out from sort of the default option. So for example, if there is an open access agreement in place that is automatically accepted, but they can opt out from that and decide to, for example, pay for an APC themselves, or if it's possible, put it behind a paywall even. But then they really have to give a reason also why they're opting out. And if there is anything to pay, well, that's just a sort of a step further in the workflow where we pre-populate all the information around billing information, etc. So based on the institution. And this can also enable us to facilitate the communication with the institutions and funders. And so this is a part that will be rolled out in a slightly later phase, but soon as well, where institutions and consortia that have, well, they wish to, they can also be asked to give an approval for invoices or agreements before it's taken further to payment or simply including it as part of an agreement. Right. And then if there is a payment by credit card, but also invoice, that payment goes directly into Emerald's accounts, but we sync the information with the finance system and CRM system so that we can know when an invoice has been paid, and if it's not paid or it's overdue, well, then we automatically trigger notifications to the party concerned, whether that is the institution or the author. So this is, of course, only when it's about an invoice. And once it's paid, we forward everything into the production system, so the article will be published. So in this way, the authors really, hopefully get as a smooth journey as possible, where they don't have to recreate a lot of information over and over again for different submissions. They have their profile in ChronosHub and can reuse all of that data for every new submission. As that billing details and agreement information is already in place, so they dynamically get everything suggested. And for the payments, well, then we can facilitate the approval requests and also serve these reports that Shelley mentioned as a self-service. So institutions can go into ChronosHub and see an overview where they stand into their agreements, and they can also download that into Excel if they want to have all the article metadata, for example. Yeah, so hopefully that is all understandable, how that sort of looks like from a workflow perspective. This is just a screenshot, but we'll move over to a live demo. You will be faced with a login screen where you see this is clearly sort of you're at Emerald, and it's powered by ChronosHub. But the login is done through the login server. And here you can, if you have already logged in, you just confirm your user, and then you're logged in. Otherwise, you're asked to put in your username and password the first time. And when you log in the first time, you get an overview here of the different services or what the workflow looks like. And when you log in the future, well, then this kind of intro is a little bit more hidden, as you can see here. And you directly have an overview of the articles that you have submitted to Emerald and where they sit in the workflow. And this is the same view, if you like, if you work with ChronosHub as an institution. It's just that then you have this overview for all articles across all publishers. And similarly, if you are a grantee from a funder that works with ChronosHub, it works in the same way. It's just different views and subsets of data. So you have this kind of overview here, but if we now look at this from the angle of an author that has a manuscript at hand, the starting point is really to find a suitable journal to make the submission into. So we are logged in as Jane Doe, and we are affiliated with the University of Granada. That means that when we look at this list of Emerald's publications or journals, we see, first of all, only Emerald's journals, 379. If you log in for an institution, you rather see about 46,000 journals. And what you see here is specific information if there is an agreement in place. And in this case, there is an agreement between the University of Granada and Emerald giving a 10% discount on the APCs, which is then also directly applied to these amounts. So in a similar way, there is information if any journal titles are part of an open access agreement with vouchers, sort of a quota, for example. And you can have different filtering possibilities here if you want to limit the list of journals to a specific topic, for example, or if the journal should be indexed in a specific database or journal list. And again, for institutions, as you know, there are a number of additional filters that you may want to include and make use of. So here we have a list of the journals, as said, and you can, of course, also search for journals, specific journals up here. And we've also included information from Sherpa Romeo, so you have sort of that kind of overview, and you can select a funder to see if it is compliant with a specific funding policy. So if we do that, you will directly see if the journal offers a route that is compliant with that funder's policy. So once we've found a suitable journal that we want to submit to, we just click the submit button and we get directly to the submission page. And this is really based on ensuring that we have all the key information to do this first step of the submission really quickly. So ideally this, right. Right. So it takes less than a minute or so. So we type in our title or paste that in, and authors we can typically find here from our own institution, if the institution is using ChronosHub, or from funders or other publishers, or if anyone has submitted a paper in the past. So we can just click here to add additional authors instead of typing in all the author details manually, like first name, last name, email address, ORCID ID, organization affiliation, etc. We just need to be careful to ensure that the right author is indicated as primarily the corresponding author, because that's what we use for all kinds of logic where we present different publishing options and payment options, etc. But otherwise, it's more, selecting from lists, the article type, or just clicking a few boxes to confirm. And if we have a grant, we can just select that from a list here as well, if we want to, and then upload one or several files as our submission. So that's all we need to do. And as you see, it's rather quick. We have an overview here. And now we just press submit article and confirm the terms and conditions, and we are done. So this is really the first step up until submission. And as an author, we don't really need to do much more now. We'll be contacted by Emerald when there are more things to fill in or a revised manuscript to submit or so. So if we go back to our dashboard, we can see our article here, a new article today with Jane Doe and the correspondent and one co-author in this case, and some other details. So at this point, the article then arrives at Emerald's end. So I've logged in a different browser so we can see a little bit what that looks like from an administrator's point of view. So here we're logged in as Emerald admin. And here you don't have sort of the same dashboard of my articles because we're rather looking at them from a lot of different angles, as you can see here. We can look at the financial accounts, or we can look at different kinds of reports, etc. But if we go to what we call the invoice flow, then we can see the articles here that have been submitted. And it takes a little bit of time before it appears here, but let's see, maybe I'll search for it. Let's see if we can find it. Yeah, a new article today. So here we find the article that was just submitted. So if we just click on that, we get back to the same page we had a look at before. But here as an admin, we can then shortcut the journey a little bit. Typically you do this in the submission system, Scholar One, but we can also do it here. So now we set that this article is accepted, right? So if we go back now here, and we just reload our page, we see that the submitted articles are now only 2, and it has moved over to accepted. So our new article is accepted. This triggers an email notification to us as an author, where we can click on a link and we get to select a publishing option. Right. So we always try to make it really clear if there are any pending actions. And you can also see them here under notifications. So a new article today, select publishing option. And when we do that, this is where, again, the different agreement information kicks in. And in this case, we see that we have this 10% discount option. We can also decide not to publish it open access in this example. So if we click here, we are presented with the corresponding CC BY license agreement, which we cannot sign before we've actually opened it up and read it. So let's do that. So here we automatically populate the license agreement with all the specific article details and author details and amounts where applicable. But we have at this point not signed it, right? So we don't have the signature here yet. So if we close that, we can now sign it. And when we do, we're simply asked to go to the payment options as a next step, right? You can still go back and now open this again and see that it has been signed if you want to, or we just then proceed to the payment options. And this is where we'll also see that the organizational billing information and similar can be pre-populated for us. So as an author, again, we don't have to do much information. And this is also where approvals kick in if an institution wants to be involved in the approval process and not let the author pay directly by credit card or by invoice. Right. So in this case, we'll just take invoice. With credit card, you'll have to type in your credit card details only. And here's the same thing. You have to read the terms and conditions and confirm those before we can request the invoice. So in these few minutes, we've been able to make our submission. We got it accepted. That's maybe unusually fast, and gone through the whole process of signing our license agreement and going through the payment. In this case, requesting invoice. So we still need to pay it, of course. And so if we go back to our dashboard here, we now see that our article is just waiting for the payment of the invoice. So there is no pending action. That we need to do in the system. This is, of course, paying then the invoice over wire transfer then. Right. Hopefully all that is understandable to everyone so far. Any questions from anyone that we should have a look at? I'll just continue. So don't hesitate to interrupt. So this means that once these articles have moved through the workflow, there are a lot of things we, of course, then can do with the information. So if we go back to the view of an administrator, this is, of course, from Emerald's perspective, but if we go to approvals, I should use that over here. With different kinds of reporting possibilities where you can filter on various aspects like time periods and journals, funder information, institutions, etc. And you get all kinds of breakdowns here of article details, etc. But what I wanted to show was more how this approval dashboard works, because it's then quite similar to what it looks like from an institutional perspective. So institutions can log when there is a pending approval, they also get an email notification, click on a link, and they get to this tab where it says pending approvals. And this is where some article information is displayed that is a bit configurable, so that can be a bit changed. And you have the invoice details and update history here based on any previous actions. And if all is good, we can approve this, but we can also conditionally approve it and say, for example, please add a PO number, for example, on the invoice before we'll accept it. And this is a kind of communication that you can do directly here in ChronosHub. And you see that sort of updates dynamically here. But this is something that we will also endeavor to support through the OA switchboard and other sort of integrations to have a system-to-system communication in that regard. And for institutions, there is also the possibility to have a self-service into their reports. and here's one example of that. Emerald calls this a voucher report. So Emerald can have an overview of what it looks like with their different agreements with different consortia. Where this is just dummy data, just to test things through and use for demonstrations. But we can see that there are in total a quota of 550 articles or vouchers across these different agreements. For the moment, there is only one used. If you look at this from an institutional perspective, well, then you can see not the different consortia, of course, but rather the different publishers that you may have agreements with. So it works in the same way. And then you can get to a list here that you can sort in various ways. And then you can drill down into the information for more details. So you see CRUI as consortium, has the University of Milano with one used voucher. And then you can drill down into that to see the individual article details, and then also export that into Excel. So you have all the article metadata that you may want to use in various ways. So with that said, I think we made sort of the tour from the author submission process through to reporting. So with that said, I'll get back to the presentation and some lessons learned.
So a key lesson learned from this work is indeed to put the author experience first. Sometimes we get competing priorities, and it really helps to have that North Star to facilitate decision making, so that we can keep in mind the purpose of why we're investing in our workflows in this way. Data inevitably needs to travel between different stakeholders and systems, and hence we have to take a collaborative approach. Emerald could have looked to just build a system itself, but that doesn't seem to be in keeping with the holistic nature of the ecosystem as we're going forward. So for us in particular, it makes sense to partner on this. One of the things that we really kept in mind when we were thinking through who we would partner with is that for us, we're really not just buying a system here, and we're not just buying a service from ChronosHub as a publisher. We're trying to think more holistically and take a more holistic perspective, including the needs of our customers, and the work with and try to work with partners that share the same overall ambitions that we do in a transition towards a more open future, putting the author at the center of that experience. Did you want to talk about data, Martin, or I can continue?
Yeah, no, so I can continue from here. So one of the important aspects of trying to really get the author experience to an industry best practice is automation. And the only way to automate the data is that we really focus on the data quality. And focusing on the data quality means really that we, in all kinds of systems, at institutions, at publishers and funders, and online sources as well, by the way, ensure that we have, or we try to follow the so-called FAIR principles, so making data findable, accessible, reusable, and identifiable. The key part of that is really the identifiable part, which means that we need to use global unique identifiers. And one example is that we have in ScholarOne, which Emerald uses as submission system, Ringgold IDs for the organizations, whereas we typically use a standard grid IDs. During the implementation we made, Grid announced that they will no longer be used, really, and it will be taken over by ROR. Luckily, there is a one-to-one mapping between ROR IDs and Grid IDs. But we had to implement a specific integration with Ringgold to have a bridge between the ROR IDs for the organizations over ISNI IDs to Ringgold IDs in one direction. And when we get the data back from ScholarOne, also in the other direction. So this is really, really key to ensure that, agreement information is displayed in the right way. Authors don't have to manually type in any information anymore. And the last part here is also what Shelley touched upon. Of course, there's a lot of technology involved and integration work, etc. But it's really about organizational change. There are a lot of things that seem to how we are working. Most people are happy because things get easier, but it's still a change, and we all know that we humans are very resistant to change of all types, even if they are actually better for us. So it's really, really crucial with a very clear communication and getting sort of an internal anchoring of these different changes. So I think that concludes the overall presentation of today's session. We're of course happy to take any questions now, or you can of course also contact us at any later point in time. Thank you very much, everyone.
Bye.